Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The Echoes of the Dead of the Overgrown Graveyard. Chapter 1, Where the Voices Linger. The graveyard did not appear on any map Elias owned. He noticed that first, standing at the rusted iron gate while dusk bled slowly into night. His phone showed a pale blue dot hovering in empty green. No road, no landmark, no name. Just forest where forest should not have been, and a graveyard where no graveyard should exist. Wind moved through the trees behind him, stirring the smell of wet earth and rot. Moss clung thickly to the stone walls flanking the gate, swallowing engraved dates and names whole. Ivy strangled the iron bars, its tendrils twisted like grasping fingers. A wooden sign hung crooked from a chain, its paint long peeled away. Something had been carved into it once, but time, or intention, had scraped it smooth. Elias hesitated. He told himself he was only here for the photographs. Overgrown cemeteries were his specialty. Places where nature reclaimed memory, where silence felt heavier than words. His small online following liked that sort of thing. Forgotten places, they called it. He had driven 3 hours after spotting a reference to an abandoned burial ground beyond the old logging road, in a decades-old local history forum. No one had mentioned voices. A faint sound drifted toward him now, so subtle he almost mistook it for wind threading through branches. It was rhythmic, uneven. Not quite a whisper. Not quite a sigh. Elias leaned closer to the gate. The sound sharpened. Words, not spoken, echoed, as if someone had shouted long ago and the sound had been trapped, bouncing endlessly between headstones and roots and earth. He could not make out the meaning, only the cadence of human speech stretched thin and frayed. "Hello?" he called, hating how small his voice sounded. The echoes stopped. Silence rushed in to fill the gap, thick and expectant. Elias swallowed and pushed the gate open. The hinges screamed. The sound cut through the graveyard like a knife, ricocheting from stone to stone, amplified and distorted until it no longer sounded like metal at all. It became something closer to a scream, high, desperate, and abruptly silenced. Elias froze, heart hammering. Then the gate swung shut behind him. The path wound inward like a vein, barely visible beneath layers of fallen leaves and creeping vines. Headstones leaned at impossible angles, some split clean in half by the roots of ancient trees. Names had been worn down to shallow scars, dates erased entirely. Here and there, a stone lay face down, as if deliberately turned away from the sky. The air felt wrong, not cold, exactly, just still. Elias noticed that his breath did not fog, despite the chill creeping through his jacket. Even the insects were silent. No chirring, no buzzing. Only the soft crunch of his boots and, beneath it, that faint, whispering undercurrent. The echoes were closer now. They slithered along the edges of his hearing, fragments of sound without clear origin. A laugh, hollow and brief. A sob that cut off too suddenly. A single word, please, repeated again and again at different pitches, as if spoken by many mouths over many years. Elias stopped walking. The whispers continued. They did not move closer. They circled him. His skin prickled. He raised his camera, snapping a photo more out of reflex than intent. The flash cut a stark white line through the gloom, illuminating twisted headstones and the looming silhouettes of trees. For an instant, less than a heartbeat, figures appeared between the graves. Not solid, not fully formed, just darker patches of shadow where no shadow should have been, shaped vaguely like people standing too still. Then the darkness swallowed them again. Elias lowered the camera, breathing hard. "Just your imagination," he muttered. "Sound carries weird in places like this." The echoes answered him. They mimicked his voice perfectly. "Just your imagination." He spun around. No one stood behind him. But the words came again, layered now, his voice overlapping itself, distorted, stretched, broken. The echoes were learning. Elias backed away, nearly tripping over a half-buried stone. His heel struck something hollow. He looked down. A grave had collapsed inward, the earth caving to reveal a dark mouth beneath. A coffin lid lay splintered below, its interior empty. The whispering surged. Not. Louder, closer. Elias turned and ran. The graveyard did not like that. The path twisted beneath his feet, no longer following a straight line. Trees shifted when he wasn't looking, their trunks crowding closer, forcing him between narrow gaps where branches scraped his jacket and tore at his skin. Headstones loomed suddenly in his way, stones he was sure had not been there seconds before. The echoes chased him. They no longer whispered. They spoke. Elias. He skidded to a halt. That voice, low, familiar, edged with exhaustion, had no right to be here. No, he said aloud. That's not possible. Elias, the echo said again, clearer this time. His father's voice. The sound came from ahead, near a massive oak whose roots split the ground like broken ribs. A single grave sat beneath it, its stone upright and strangely intact compared to the others. Fresh, almost. The name carved into it was painfully clear. Thomas Hart, 1962 to 2021. Elias's knees buckled. I buried you, he whispered. I stood there. I heard the dirt hit the coffin. The oak creaked as wind passed through it, yet there was still no wind. I know, the echo replied gently. That's why I'm still here. The ground around the grave stirred. Not violently. Just enough to suggest movement beneath the soil, slow and patient. Elias staggered back, bile rising in his throat. You're dead, he said. You're dead. You're not real. A second voice joined the first. Then a third. Then dozens. All speaking his name. The echoes rose from every grave, every broken stone, every patch of earth. Familiar voices layered over unfamiliar ones. Men, women, children, some pleading, some angry, some eerily calm. We never leave, they said together. The oak's roots shifted, pulling tighter around the grave like fingers closing into a fist. Elias turned and fled again, no longer caring where he ran, only that he ran away. He burst through the gate and stumbled onto the road, collapsing to his hands and knees on cold asphalt. His chest heaved as he sucked in air that finally felt real. Behind him, the graveyard stood silent and still, the gate hanging open, innocent and empty. No whispers. No echoes. Elias laughed shakily, dragging himself upright. I'm done, he said aloud. I'm done. He did not look back as he walked to his car. He did not notice the sound following him. Not footsteps. Echoes. That night, Elias dreamed of soil filling his mouth. He woke choking, the taste of dirt thick on his tongue. His bedroom was dark, familiar shapes barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. His heart raced as he reached for the lamp. Before he could turn it on, he heard it. A whisper. Right beside his ear. You shouldn't have left. He froze. The voice was not his father's. It was his own. And somewhere, far beneath the earth, something echoed back. Chapter 2 When the Dead Answer Back. Elias did not sleep. He lay rigid on his bed, eyes open, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling that ran like a lightning bolt from corner to corner. The house was silent in the way only occupied houses could be, full of small, familiar sounds that should have been comforting. The refrigerator hummed, pipes ticked as they cooled. Somewhere outside, a branch scraped gently against siding. And beneath it all, so faint he could almost convince himself it was imagined, came the echo. Not words. Breath. Slow. Patient. Right behind his ear. Elias rolled onto his side, heart slamming, and the sound stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt deliberate, as though something had leaned back, satisfied. He sat up and flicked on the lamp. Warm yellow light filled the bedroom. Posters on the walls. A half-packed camera bag on the chair. Everything exactly as it should be. His phone lay on the nightstand, screen dark. He grabbed it anyway, hands shaking, and checked the time. 3:17 a.m. A chill crept through him. The same time he'd woken during the nights after his father's funeral. The same time he'd first started dreaming of soil and roots and voices whispering beneath his feet. "This isn't real," he muttered. The echo answered, "Not real." The word drifted from the hallway, stretched thin, warped at the edges like sound bouncing down a long tunnel. Elias flinched so hard he nearly dropped his phone. "No," he said loudly. "No, you're not here." The house did not respond. Instead, the echo repeated his words, "No. Not here," layered over themselves. Each repetition slightly off, slightly wrong, until the phrase became something else entirely. "We are here." Elias bolted out of bed. He turned on every light in the house. The hallway flooded with brightness, banishing shadows but doing nothing to ease the tightness in his chest. He moved room to room, checking corners, closets, behind doors, anything to reassure himself that nothing had followed him home from the graveyard. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. Yet as he passed the bathroom mirror, he heard a soft sound behind him. A cough. He spun around. The hallway was empty. The cough came again, closer this time. Too close. Elias's reflection stared back at him from the mirror. Pale, wide-eyed, afraid. Then the reflection opened its mouth. "You shouldn't have left." Elias staggered back, crashing into the opposite wall. The sound echoed down the hallway, repeating again and again, each impact distorted into a dull, wet thud that did not match the noise his body had made. "No," he whispered. The reflection did not move its lips again, but the echo continued, pouring from the mirror, the walls, the ceiling. "You shouldn't have left." He ripped the towel from the rack and flung it over the mirror, covering his reflection completely. The echo faltered, then dissolved into silence. Elias slid down the wall, pressing his hands over his ears. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Eventually, exhaustion dragged him under. Morning brought no relief. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bright and ordinary, but the echoes lingered like an afterimage burned into his senses. Elias moved through his routine in a daze, half expecting voices to spill from the coffee maker, the sink, the radio. They did not. Instead, the world felt hollow. Sounds behaved strangely. Footsteps rang too loud. His own breathing sounded distant, as if heard through layers of earth. When he spoke, his voice seemed to hesitate before reaching his ears. At noon, he received a message. Unknown number. You left something behind. His fingers hovered over the screen. Who is this? He typed, then erased it. He tried again. How did you get this number? 3 dots appeared immediately. Unknown number. We hear everything you say there. Elias's stomach dropped. Where? He typed. The reply came slower this time. Unknown number. Where you listened. The graveyard. Elias threw the phone onto the couch as if it had burned him. It vibrated once more, buzzing against the fabric. He did not check it. He tried to distract himself by editing photos from previous trips. Familiar images filled his monitor, abandoned houses, rusted signs, trees reclaiming forgotten spaces. He scrolled through them quickly, avoiding the folder labeled Graveyard. The cursor moved on its own. Elias froze as the folder opened. Images loaded one by one. The gate, the path, the broken grave, then a photo he did not remember taking. A close-up of a headstone beneath an oak tree. Thomas Hart, 1962 to 2021. Elias's breath caught. The image zoomed in slowly, smoothly, without his input. The stone's surface filled the screen. Hairline cracks ran through the letters, deepening as he watched. A sound crawled out of the speakers. "Soil," a voice whispered. Elias slammed the laptop shut. The echo lingered in the room anyway, bouncing off walls that were not made for it. By evening, he knew he could not stay. The house felt too small. The air too heavy. Every surface seemed to carry sound differently, as though the walls were learning how to repeat him better. He packed a bag with shaking hands and left without looking back, driving aimlessly until the city swallowed him whole. Traffic noise, voices, music, real noise, crowded around him, overwhelming and reassuring. For a while, the echoes faded. He checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, paid in cash, and collapsed onto the bed without turning on the TV. The sheets smelled like bleach and stale air. The sounds outside were constant and comforting. He slept. The dream returned immediately. He stood in the graveyard again, though the trees were closer now, their branches interlocking overhead, blotting out the sky. Headstones crowded the path, pressing in from all sides. The whispers rose from the ground, louder than before, forming words he could finally understand. "Listen." Elias tried to run, but the soil clutched his ankles, cold hands dragging him down. He screamed as the ground opened beneath him, swallowing him whole. He woke gasping, tangled in sheets. The motel room was dark. Too dark. The glow from the parking lot lights did not reach the window. The air was thick, damp, smelling faintly of moss and rot. He sat up slowly. There was no traffic noise. No distant voices. Only the echo. Soft, steady, breathing. Elias swung his legs off the bed, feet touching something cold and uneven. Not carpet. Earth. He fumbled for the lamp. The light flicked on. He screamed. The motel room was gone. He stood at the edge of an overgrown graveyard. The same rusted gate loomed behind him, vines curling tighter around the bars than before. The wooden sign hung crooked, its surface no longer smooth. Words had been carved into it. Listen carefully. The whispers surged, no longer content to stay beneath the soil. They rose around him, voices overlapping, familiar and strange, forming a single, dreadful chorus. "You came back," they said. Elias stumbled away from the gate, heart pounding. "I didn't," he said. "I never came back." The echo laughed. "You never left." He turned slowly. Behind him stood a headstone, newly placed, the soil around it still dark and wet. His name was carved deep into the stone, letters sharp and unweathered. Elias Hart. The date was missing. The whisper brushed his ear, intimate and final. "We're waiting." Chapter 3: The Echo That Remains. Elias did not touch the headstone. He stood inches from it, breath shallow, afraid that even acknowledging it with his hands would make the graveyard's claim real in a way it already felt too close to becoming. Snow-damp earth clung to the base of the stone, darker than the surrounding ground, freshly turned. The carved letters of his name seemed deeper than they should have been, as if the stone itself had wanted to remember them. Elias Hart. The missing date pulsed in his mind like an open wound. "You're not real," he whispered, though the words felt thin and fragile against the weight of the place. "This isn't happening." The graveyard listened. The echoes answered, not all at once, but in layers, some distant, some near enough that he felt breath stir the hair at the back of his neck. "We are as real as you are," they murmured. "As real as you were." Elias staggered backward, nearly colliding with a leaning headstone. The forest pressed close now, trees bent inward as if curious, their branches forming crooked arches over the graves. The sky above was a uniform gray, neither night nor day, a lid pressed tightly over the world. "How do I get out?" Elias demanded, his voice cracking. "You brought me back. You can let me go." The whispers softened. Pity crept into them. "No one lets go," the dead said. "They only echo." The ground beneath his feet shifted. Not violently. Just enough to unbalance him, to remind him that the earth here was loose, unsettled. Graves breathed around him, slow, patient inhalations that lifted the soil and let it settle again. Elias turned in a slow circle. Every path led deeper into the graveyard. The gate was gone. He walked until his legs ached, past stones cracked by roots and markers swallowed entirely by moss. Names whispered at him as he passed, some he recognized, neighbors, old classmates, distant relatives, and others that meant nothing at all. Dates overlapped, tangled, impossible. Time did not behave here. He came upon a section of graves unlike the rest. The stones were arranged in neat rows, their surfaces worn smooth not by age but by touch. Finger marks smoothed into the rock, grooves worn where hands had gripped too tightly for too long. This was where the voices were loudest. They did not whisper here. They spoke clearly, plainly, their echoes bouncing only once before returning. "This is where we learned," a voice said. Elias turned toward it. A figure stood between two stones, barely more than a silhouette at first. As Elias approached, details sharpened. A man about his father's age, features familiar in a way that made Elias's chest ache. "Dad?" he whispered. The figure smiled sadly. "I'm what's left." The echo of his father's voice carried none of the warmth he remembered. It was flattened, thinned, as if memory itself had been worn down by repetition. "You died," Elias said. "You're buried." The figure nodded. "Yes. And yet you're here. So are you." Elias shook his head. "Not yet." His father's echo tilted its head. "Aren't you?" The ground trembled faintly beneath them, a subtle, rhythmic pulse. Elias felt it then, the truth pressing up through him like something long buried. The dreams, the timing, the way the graveyard had known his name before he ever spoke it aloud. He remembered the night his father died. The phone call at 3:17 a.m. The hollow sound his own voice had made when he answered, already echoing with grief before the words were even spoken. "You've been listening for us for a long time," his father's echo said gently. "You just didn't know it." The echoes around them swelled, voices overlapping. "You heard us when the dirt fell. When the coffin closed. When the living walked away." Elias staggered back, hands pressed to his ears. "No, I left. I moved on." "You ran," the echoes corrected. "There's a difference." The air thickened, heavy with sound. Elias's own thoughts began to echo back at him before he could fully form them. His fear repeated and amplified until it no longer felt like his own. He backed away, heart pounding. "I'm not dead," he said. "I can still feel." His father's echo stepped closer, close enough that Elias could see the way his edges blurred, never quite settling. "So can we," it said. "That's the curse." The truth came all at once. Not spoken, not whispered, remembered. The graveyard did not trap the dead. It trapped the unheard. Those whose voices were swallowed by soil and stone, whose grief lingered too heavy to dissipate. Their words did not fade. They rebounded, echoing until the echoes learned how to listen back. And Elias had been listening his entire life. Every unanswered question, every late-night conversation whispered into the dark. Every memory replayed until it lost its edges. The graveyard had felt him long before he arrived. "You're a bridge," the voices said. "You always were." The ground beneath his feet softened, earth turning pliant and wet. Elias felt himself sink an inch, then another, soil clutching at his boots like welcoming hands. Panic surged through him. "I don't want this," he cried. The echoes quieted. For the first time since his return, the graveyard was almost silent. Almost. His father's voice remained. "Neither did any of us." Elias looked at the headstones around him. At the worn grooves carved by desperate hands. At the names blurred beyond recognition by too much remembering. "What happens if I stay?" he asked. The echoes answered in unison. "You remember for us." The soil pulled him down to his ankles now. Cold seeped through his skin, numbing, inevitable. Elias struggled, but the earth held firm, not cruel, just patient. If I listen, he said slowly, you'll stop following the living. The voices hesitated. Yes, they said. Elias closed his eyes. He thought of the night air outside the graveyard. Of ordinary sounds that did not echo back wrong. Of a world that did not remember every word spoken into it. I'll stay, he whispered. But not like this. The echoes leaned in. I'll be the silence, Elias said. The place where you end. The graveyard shuddered. Something ancient shifted beneath the soil, unsettled by the idea. The earth loosened its grip. Elias felt himself sinking further, knees, thighs, waist, the cold climbing steadily upward. Panic flared again, but he held onto his resolve, focusing on the voices as they poured into him, names, memories, regrets, final words. He listened, every echo, every whisper, until they no longer needed to repeat themselves. When the sun rose the next morning, the overgrown graveyard was quiet. Birds returned hesitantly, their calls tentative but real. Wind moved through the trees without carrying voices along with it. The rusted gate stood open, creaking softly in the breeze. A new headstone rested beneath the oak. Elias Hart, 1989 to 2024. The date had appeared. No one noticed when the old sign at the gate changed, its letters deepening into something legible at last. Here lie the listened to dead. Years later, visitors would say the graveyard felt peaceful, despite its wild state. Quiet in a way that settled the nerves rather than frayed them. But sometimes, if you stood very still and spoke aloud, just once, you would feel the earth lean closer. Not to answer, but to listen. For more stories, like and subscribe.